Good morning. I am Ajahn SARATH. I am from the Department of International Language Teaching. On the occasion of our 5th year students leaving the university for careers, I wish to send my greetings and best wishes to all of you and hope that you will become one of the best teachers in your country in the future. So while I send my greetings, I should like to add something to your knowledge, because since most of you are going to be teachers, what I'm going to tell you will really be helpful to you in your teaching career in the future, right? So today I have selected an important topic. You can see on the screen what is teaching. So now we have been teaching, and you have been also a teachers for maybe almost 1 year, right? And 3 semesters you have had your teaching sessions or teaching training in schools, and you taught to students in different schools, and now you may have got some first-hand experience in teaching, right? But I wonder whether you exactly know the definition of teaching. First of all, I want to explain it to you, the definition. Why? In this definition, everything is included, what a teacher should do and what teaching really means. I will look at the screen. I will explain it. First, I will explain the definition. So this is the definition, right? Teaching is guiding and facilitating learning, enabling the learner to learn, setting the conditions for learning. I'll repeat once more. Teaching is guiding and facilitating learning, enabling the learner to learn, setting the conditions for learning. So this is the most complete, so we can say one of the complete definitions, right? So I will talk about the author later, right? And now I want to explain this to you, right, in more detail. Now look at, we will consider these components of the definition of teaching, so that you can simply identify what teaching means, right? And how teaching you should do. First one is, you can see, guiding. Teaching is guiding. What is guiding? Now, when you hear this word, guide means you show someone, right? You show someone the right way to do something, or the right path to proceed, the right path to continue going. That is guiding, right? So what do we do actually to our students? When we go to our classroom, we guide them, right? We tell them good things. In addition to teaching our subjects, or teaching maybe the subject or some content, right? Some subject matter, right? Whatever it is, we guide our students in the right way by telling all these, by advising, right? Consulting them, telling them how to do something correctly or right, in a right manner. Then the next component is facilitating. Now we know what do you mean by facilitate? Actually, facilitate means you make something easier for someone to do it, right? Now here, when we talk about facilitating, now when you go to the classroom, every one of you know that you make the content of your lesson, make it easy for the learner to learn. What do you do? Now think of teaching reading text or reading paragraph or maybe a passage to your class. Now, first what do? You pre-teach the important or maybe some difficult words, or we generally say vocabulary. We pre-teach the vocabulary, right? Then that is facilitating, right? One act of facilitating. Because why? The students may not understand some words included in the passage. So they may be not able to read the text or the passage and understand it unless they are explained the vocabulary, right? So that is one way of facilitating. And maybe you may ask some comprehension questions, right, from the class to see whether they know something about the subject, right, or the topic, right, especially the topic. And then maybe you read one part of the passage or maybe one paragraph, and then you ask some more question relating to the content of the passage, right? So by all these things, what you do, you facilitate the learner to read the text by their own, right? So that is the second component. Then the next one is enabling the learner. By doing all these things, we assume that these things will help or enable, right? Enable means help the learner to learn, because now you guide them on the right way, and then you make the task easier for them, then automatically or naturally the task of learning can occur or can happen, right? But still we cannot be sure. Why? There is another component is there. What is that component? That component is setting conditions for learning. What do we mean by that? Now, when you, before you teach, remember how many things you have to do. Teaching is not an easy task, right? You need to prepare a lot, okay? You have a lot of pre-preparation activities. You have to make maybe lesson plan, right? You have to write a lesson plan, and then you have to design some activities for the students to do, right? And then maybe you make worksheets, and you use or you make or design visual aids. We know that even using visual aids, we can make certain concept easier for the learners to understand, right? Now, all these things involve or come under setting conditions, right? Now, when you go to the class, right, then you have your materials with you, and then you have your activities already prepared, right? And then maybe the task sheets are prepared, and then what do? Then you go to the classroom, and then you tell the student, okay, right, today we are going to learn speaking, or we are going to do some speaking activities. Today I want you to do this pair work. or maybe sometimes a group work. Depending on your activity, you can think of what kind of activity it is, right? It may be a pair work, or maybe a group work, right? Or maybe an individual task or individual work, right? Now imagine today, right? You want to teach how to, you want to teach going shopping, right? Because that going shopping is one of the most interesting and important activity for most learners. So you can introduce that one. Okay, today I want you to go to a shop and buy something, right? And you can tell what they want to buy, or you can ask them to think of what they want to buy. Maybe a pair of shoes, maybe a bag, maybe a pair of spectacles, or any other electronic gadgets, what they want. You can give them the freedom to select, right? And then you tell, okay, now you get into pairs, right? Get into pairs, and this is the situation, right? You want to buy a pair of shoes, or you can tell the students, or you select what you want to buy. Whatever you want to buy, you select, right? And you want to buy this thing or that thing. Then you go to a shop and you talk to the sales assistant. Usually in a shop, you find a sales assistant, and you talk to the sales assistant and you tell what you want to buy. Then he will assist you and he will give you more information about the product that you want to buy, right? Imagine if it were a pair of shoes, the sales assistant might ask you some question. He wants to know your size, right? He may ask, what size are you? What color do you like, right? And then sometimes you may ask about the price also. Price is also very important, right? And in general, the prices of shoes are not reduced, because you have, they have a fixed price, right? So there is a tag. So you can look at the tag, and sometimes you can ask, right? Can you give me a discount? Or there may be discounted items, right? Okay, now that is the situation. So you can ask, right? Okay, you pair, right? Now in one pair, you have a customer. One of you is a customer. The other one is a sales assistant, right? And now you go to the shop and talk, right? Talk to the sales assistant, and tell you what you want, right? And then you can ask them to practice it. And sometimes the students may lack knowledge. May lack some words, may lack some phrases, right? So you can help them, right? There, again, you facilitate, right? And then you do, right? Okay, then finally, you can ask, okay, now have you finished? Right, okay. Then once you finish, you can present your conversation or the dialogue to the class. Please come forward. Okay, right, stand here. And if you want, you can use the items, right? The items that are available in the classroom. Usually shoes are available because the student already, they have worn it, so they can remove, right? And they can show it. Because then, although they do not go to a real shop at this time, they will get that it is a real world situation, right? So then the students can speak it out to the class, and maybe not 100% right, but you can help them again, right? And you can give them feedback if there are any mistakes they made, right? So this is actually, you set the conditions for learning to take place, right? Even if you facilitate, even if you guide, right? And that won't be enough, right? You have to set conditions for the students to practice the language, use the language in the classroom, right? In the classroom, we know it's not a real world situation, but we have to create some real world situation, right? So the innovative teachers can do it, right? So I hope now you understood the all components of the definition of teaching, right? Teaching is guiding and facilitating, enabling the learners to learn by setting conditions for learning, right? So I think this definition you should remember until you leave your career as a teacher. Thank you very much. So this is the first part of my speech, and the second part will deal with a teaching methodology, because that is also very important. So when I say teaching methodology, I'm going to talk about one important teaching approach. The teaching approach I'm going to talk to you today is called communicative language teaching, mostly known as CLT, right? The main goal of CLT is to develop learners' fluency in the language used. So what do we mean by fluency? Fluency is the ability to communicate effectively. Then, if we want to develop learners' fluency in the target language, we have to use classroom activities. So what type of classroom activities are we going to use? Then the answer is communicative activities. So what are communicative activities? We will see what they are, what communicative activities are. Now, before we talk about the communicative activities, we have to see that there are three types of practice activities generally we use in classroom teaching. One is called mechanical practice, where we use some specially drill. You may have sometimes done in your teaching, right? So we call them mechanical activities, so mechanical practice, right? Now, I will explain them later. In mechanical activities or practice, what we do is the language is controlled. The learner cannot use any other language item or any other words. He has to maybe substitute certain things. He can substitute certain things, and then the teacher, I will show you later, the teacher demonstrate. The teacher will say, okay, repeat after me. Okay, I will show you later after this. And then the second type is called meaningful practice. Now, in meaningful practice, the language control is still there, but the learners have a choice, right? Because they can select the language in a meaningful way. That's why we call it meaningful practice. I will explain with an example, okay? And then we come to the third practice activity, which is called communicative language practice. Why do we call communicative? Because the language actually happens, or language is spoken in a real communicative context, right? I will explain it, how we do it, and what a real communication context is, right? And we move to the next one, right? and I will give you an example of a mechanical practice, right? Now, teacher says a model. Model can be a word or maybe sometimes phrases, right? And the students repeat them. You may have done it in classrooms, right? And look at this one. Example, this is a repetition drill we call drill, right? Repetition drill because the teacher says first and then the student follows it or the student repeats it. Student repeat it. Example, the teacher can say, I like cooking, right? Then student or the class will say or will repeat, I like cooking. And then the teacher will say, I like playing. The student will say, I like playing. The students will repeat what the teacher says first, right? So that is an example of repetition drill. And I will show you another example, but this one is called a substitution drill. Substitute mean the teacher will give you a word, then you have to use that word, right? We will see what it is, okay? The teacher substitute one or more keywords or changes the prompt and the learner say the new structure. So the structure is this one, right? Diana likes pop music. Then student says, Diana likes pop music. Then the teacher does not say the complete sentence. He will give you a prompt. He will give you a word like he says rock. Then student has to substitute what? Pop music with rock. Then the student will say Diana likes rock music. Then teacher again says he hates doing homework. Students say he hates doing homework. Then teacher will give out, right? Gives out another word, another verb, right? He may say going out. Then students should substitute doing homework with going out, right? Then the student might say he hates going out, right? So this kind of drill is called substitution drill. The previous one is a repetition drill, right? Now all these come under mechanical practice. Why? The language is controlled. The student have no choice of language, right? Now here the only choice is the teacher gives you a word, right? In the substitution drill, the teacher tells a different, maybe a noun or maybe a verb, then you have to substitute it, okay? So this is a substitution drill, and the previous one is all these we call mechanical practice, right? Whether it is a repetition drill or a substitution drill, whatever it is, there are other drills also, there are many more, but I'm not going to talk all about it now, right? Just to give you an idea what mechanical practice is, okay? Then we'll move on to the next one. Next one is, you remember, next one is we call, yes, meaningful practice, right? Meaningful practice. Now here we will see what is meaningful. Right now here, the language is still controlled, but the student can make some meaningful choices. That's why we call meaningful practice. For example, imagine if a teacher, right? Imagine now if you want to teach prepositions, right? To describe location of places. You have, I think you have done this in your classroom. You have taught prepositions, right? And here we will take this example, okay? You want to teach prepositions to describe location of places. For this activity, actually, a teacher can use a map, street map like this. Now here you can see some roads are already, I mean streets are marked, right? And then some places are marked, right? And for example, bank is there, police station, and some store, hospital, right? Train station. The important buildings are there in this map. So this is easy for the students to locate it, where a building is. Now imagine if you ask, where's the police station? Then the student can see it where it is located. They can say, right, it's on the main street, right? Main street. Then he can give actually the actual location, right? They can say in front of the drugstore, or they can say between the bank and the store, right? And for this activity, you can give or you can use the street map like this, and you have to provide the students with some prepositions also, right? Where, I mean, the preposition which we use to describe locations. For example, maybe on, in the corner, right? Or maybe between, right? Between, across from, in front of, behind, like this, right? Then we have to give the student some prepositions also. And then we can ask the student, okay, right? Okay, one student. Sometimes this can be practiced as a group or maybe in pairs, right? So one student shows the map and he might say, oh, I want to go to the church, right? Or where is it? Then the other student look at the map and then he tells the location of the church. Or maybe sometimes another student, right, will ask, where is the train station? Then you look at the map and you will tell the location, where the location of the train station is. So like this, you can ask the students to practice. So after they finish practicing it, you can ask some questions based on the map. You can ask, right, from the whole class, where is the library, right? Then they may say, they have to say, it's on First Street, in front of the school, or you can say in front of the, or across from the post office. Both are correct, right? And again, sometimes you can, where is the movie theater? Or it's on the main street across from the store. Or you can say it is, or movie theater is next to the drugstore, right? So that's why we need to give some prepositions, right? Prepositions which are used to describe location of places, right? Okay, now here, this activity is actually meaningful. So that is why we call them meaningful practice, right? So now you got, okay, now you learned mechanical practice, and this one is meaningful practice. The next one is, we go to the next one, right? So the next one is actually so now here you can give the, I mean, this is also connected with the previous one, meaningful practice, right? Then the why we say it, because the student have to answer or respond according to the location of places on the map, right? So that's why we say meaningful, right? So the next one is communicative practice, right? So this is actually the most important practice. Why do I say most important? Here, the students really they have to use some maybe the real language, and they have a real context, right? Real world situation. They are given a real world situation, right? So that's why we call it communicative, right? So the goal of communicative language is to make our learners actually fluent in the use of the target language. Then now here it says that the communicative practice happens within a real communicative context, right? Then the student should exchange real information. And another thing is now maybe in mechanical practice as well as meaningful practice, the language is controlled, right? But here language is not controlled, and the language is again not predictable, right? Because why? Predictable means we can say what happens next, right? But here language is not predictable means we do not know what a speaker will ask, right? Or will tell, or what kind of question a speaker, maybe sometimes your friend, right, will ask you. So that's why we call language is not predictable, right? So in this communicative practice, and we'll take the same example, okay? We'll take the same example. And now here, the teacher, right, can ask the class, right, to draw a map of their city or their neighborhood, right? So they draw a map, okay? It's not going to be a perfect one, right? They can draw some roads, right? And they can mark some buildings. They can write the real building names, right? And the real names of the roads in their city or maybe in their neighborhood, right? And then this is a real situation, okay? Then again we have to ask them to name a few places, right? For example, maybe the bank, train station, maybe a hotel, restaurant, right? Whatever it is. We know that in a neighborhood or in a city, what kind of buildings are located, right? So they can draw and they can name the real buildings, right? And then what are we going to do? The next activity is we can give a situation, right? Situation, for example, student A can ask about the location of student B's house, right? This is something we can do, right? In addition to asking other places, right? And or maybe sometimes this one is going to a house, the location of the house, but the students still can ask about the location of other buildings, right? Maybe the bank, maybe the post office, maybe the school, right? So whatever the place, a place which is marked there in their map, right? They can ask, right? They can practice. They can ask, where is the post office? I want to post a letter, right? Or I want to send a parcel. Then the other student should give the location of the post office according to the map that they have drawn, right? He or she has drawn, right? And in addition to that, sometimes we can use some extension activities also, right? For example, look at this. A and B are friends. Now we know that in a classroom, all are friends, right? Now here in this situation, we'll imagine that A and B are friends, right? Then A look at the B's map and ask, where is your house? Okay. Then B locates his house on the map and he says or answers, or it's behind this hospital, right? And he may invite, right, his friend. You can visit our house at weekend, right, if you are free. Then he can say, oh, that's great. How can I come? Can you tell me the directions, right? Direction, how to go there. Yes, of course. how do you plan to come? He can ask the way, right? Or the mode of travel. Or in a car with my maybe brother, or maybe with my father, right? With someone else in his or her family, right? Then the B, right, can give the directions, right? He can say, okay, first you drive to our city, then you come to this road, right? And then you will find a big building, right? Its name is this X building, right? And then at the X building, turn left. You can see a street. That street is called Y Street. So if you drive about 100 meters, you can see a bridge, right? And then you pass the bridge. As you pass, you can see a storied building on your right. That is my house. It's not very difficult for you to find it, right? So by giving the students this kind of activity, then there is a real need for them to communicate. Unlike in mechanical and meaningful practice, right? So that is why I ask you to use communicative practice in your classroom. Then only the students will feel, oh, we need to do this one. Why? There is a necessity, there is a need, right? So you have to explain them the need, why they need to use the language, right? So that is why the communicative approach, or the communicative, now here actually the practice, okay, communicative practice is important. So I encourage all of you to use communicative practice in your classroom if you really want to improve your learners' fluency in the target language. Okay. In classroom teaching, we use methods and we use approaches. And again, we have to use classroom techniques. Now, earlier, I talked about one of the important teaching approach, which is called communicative language teaching. Now I am going to talk about one of the most important classroom techniques, and it is called questioning, or we can say verbal questioning. I should like to tell you that even Einstein once said that the important thing is not to stop questioning. So it says that questioning is very important in our classroom teaching. So now let me share the screen with you in order to give you a better understanding about questioning or verbal questioning. As you can see, as I told earlier, the important thing is not to stop questioning. Now here, actually, we find how important is questioning. Now he says, Albert Einstein says, the important thing is not to stop questioning. It means we have to continue questioning. So what do you mean by questioning? Actually, in classroom teaching, sometimes you may have some idea about it, right? But here, what I want to draw your attention is to different types of verbal questions. Because sometimes in classroom, when we teach or when we start or before we start our lesson, we start asking several questions. Maybe we want to motivate, or we want to engage our students in the classroom activity that we are going to teach, or maybe sometimes just we want to know something about the students, right? Sometimes we question the class, or we question the students about their personal matters also. But here I'm going to focus on specifically different types of verbal questions. Now, the most common type is we call close questions. What do you mean by close questions? Close questions means, now if you ask, for example, if you ask a question like this, do you like music, or can you speak English? The answer is either yes or no. Then after that, a communication or a conversation will not happen. Therefore, the close questions generally we should try to avoid in our classroom teaching. Why? Because then after answering, maybe yes, a student might say yes, or he might say no. Then after that, there is no communication continuation, right? But sometimes imagine if you ask an open question, right? An open question like this: what kind of music do you like? Right? Then he will say some, right? The type of music he will like, he will answer, right? Maybe classical, maybe rock, maybe reggae, whatever music he likes, he might say. Then you have to continue asking why, right? Because the open question should be followed by why. Then the students will have some chance to tell something more rather than stopping saying yes or no, or rather than stopping saying only the type of music he or she likes, right? So why should be followed? Then he can talk something more, which is very important, right? Then the next type is called direct questions. So what are direct questions? Now, most of our teaching situations, we ask this question, right? Now, actually, the direct questions are the type of questions the teacher, maybe teacher can nominate a learner to ask a question, and then the learner answers the question, right? Imagine it may be relating to the content of your lesson, or maybe relating actually some other idea, right? Whatever it is, you name someone in the classroom, and then you ask the question, then the learner answer it. Okay, so they are called direct questions. Sometimes, most of the time, we do this, right? And the other type is called indirect questions. Indirect questions are generally important. Why? Because now imagine the teacher asks the question, right? He asks a question, the students then, or ask the class a question, and then the whole class gets ready to answer, because first he does not nominate anyone, right? He posed the question to the class, right? Then everyone in the class mentally gets ready to answer that question. What do you mean by mentally getting ready? Means you start thinking about the question, right? Then you prepare cognitively to answer the question, right? So that is very important for students' engagement, right? Cognitively, you have to engage the student, because it's very important. Actually, learning is a cognitive process. as we know, right? Because you have to think about, right? When a question is asked, you have to think about the question. You give some time. That is why the teachers tend to ask direct questions from the class, right? Then imagine, then after that, right, the teacher poses the question to the class. Then the student mentally gets ready to answer the question. Why everyone, not a particular student in the class? Then the teacher can nominate some, right? Although he posed the question to the whole class, then in indirect questions, the teacher can nominate some. The teacher can ask someone, right? Okay, you can ask, okay, Jim, can you tell me the answer? Or what is the answer? He can ask the question from the nominated student. So that is, they are called indirect questions. And then we'll move to the next type is called attitudinal questions. They're also important, right? Because sometimes we have to ask the students' opinion towards something, right? So that we can get to know what their attitudes is towards something, right? It can be regarding anything. Now, for example, we can ask, what's your opinion about the COVID-19 situation in your area, right? Or you can ask, what kind of social problems do the people in your area suffer, right? So it can be anything because they have some opinion to share with the class, right? That is also very important. And the next type is called reflective questions, right? Now here, what do you mean by reflective? Actually, the reflective questions help the teacher to know whether the learners can apply what they have already learned or what they have previously learned. Now, if the students cannot apply what they have learned previously, then our teaching will not produce any outcome. Therefore, we should know what we teach, and the student should be able to apply, right? Apply to their life, apply to day-to-day situations, right? So that is also one of the main tasks of our teaching. The student should be able to apply what they have learned. So we have to check it. We have to measure it. We have to test it. How can we do that? We have to ask reflective questions. So what do we mean by reflective question? Now, usually when we think about reflective question, usually the reflective questions can be conditional type of questions, right? So everybody knows what conditional questions. For example, I have given you 2 examples, but there are number of examples you can think of, right? This is one, right? If you were the manager of this hotel, what would you do to attract more visitors to the hotel, right? So then the learner has to tell his idea, tell his plan, right? For the future, what actually he is going to do if he were the manager of this hotel. This is one situation, right? Then another situation, another reflective question, mostly we tend to ask is, right? If you won $1 million from a lottery, what would you do with the money? Then the student has to think critically, and he has to think logically, and he has to provide the teacher or the class with the well-formed answer, right? So these type of questions, actually the reflective questions, will help learner to talk about more maybe sometimes about his planning, future planning, or about what he is going to do if he get a position, or if he were elected, right, to a position in the society, right? So these kind of questions will generate more ideas, right? Will generate more ideas and will give students more opportunities for them to express themselves. So the main reason of questioning is actually that we want to engage our learners and we want to interact our learners, not only actually maybe not only about our subject area, right? And we can question them regarding social issues, right? Family matters, anything that is related to their life. They are very important. Therefore, remember, verbal questioning plays a very important role in interaction, right? So interaction is one condition for language acquisition. Therefore, you have to interact the students as well as you have to engage the students in your teaching process. If you don't do that, right, you don't ask any questions, right, then a conversation will not happen. Conversation will not happen means the students will not respond. So we do not want our students to keep silence all the time during our teaching. We want our students to participate actively in the discussion, in the teaching, actually, in your teaching or classroom discussion. So you can do these things only by asking different types of verbal questions. So I think now this technique you will employ in your future teaching. And I wish you all the best and good luck. Then I will end up here. Thank you very much for your patient listening.